Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Elbows up. This is a phrase that has become synonymous with Canadians' sense of nationalism and refusal to back down in the ongoing trade war with the U.S. The term going back to hockey legend Gordie Howe, who is known for his toughness and using elbows on the ice. And it has now become more than just a hashtag or a phrase mouthed by Mike Myers on SNL. It has become a movement, one that has brought out thousands of Canadians rallying together and standing strong at events right across the country. I'm Melanie Ng, and in this episode of The Big Story, we speak with one of the organizers of Elbows Up Canada, Peter Wall, about the grassroots movement that is taking the nation by storm. Peter, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Mel. Nice to be on.
All right, let's go backwards. Where to begin? That's the big question. Where did the idea of starting this movement, this organization, and bringing out rallies, bringing out people, where did the thought process go?
Well, believe it or not, it came to me at 4 a.m, about 4 weeks ago in the middle of the night. I literally woke up and actually recorded myself. I was like, Elbows Up Canada, non-partisan rally, Parliament Hill this weekend. And I started, and normally I sleep well, Mel, like I'm a good sleeper. But my wife had gone to a protest the day before outside the U.S. Embassy because she felt like she needed to do something. And it was totally the wrong vibe. It was like, raining and 50 people, and it was not the right energy. And so I had been, following the news and reading things and getting increasingly frustrated like a lot of Canadians. And then I just woke up in the middle of the night and said, we need to do something, and we need to gather in a positive, nonpartisan way that really puts Canadian unity at the forefront of these gatherings. And so we had our first meeting at noon that day, and 5 days later we had 1,500 people on Parliament Hill.
When you say we, how many people involved here?
So we had, for the Ottawa organizing team, it pretty quickly grew to about 30 people. There was a group of about 10 of us that were the core group. And, through our friends and network, we reached out to people like Sean Majunder and the mayor and, Lloyd Axworthy. And my kids played. My kids have a band here in Ottawa, and they played, we had a house band. For all the events that we've had, we have a house band. So they kind of play at the start and play at the end and play as people come on and off. And we did this community interaction thing which is actually a lot of people's favorite part of the events. We asked people to find someone in the crowd that they don't know, that they didn't come with, and to introduce themselves and to ask them why they're there. And then it was amazing on Parliament Hill. We did it the first day, the first event, and it was like a cocktail party had broken out on Parliament Hill. Like, bam, all of a sudden, all these people chatting and talking. And it just, the events, they give you the sense that you can do something.
Okay, so this happens on Parliament Hill, and you and your group say, we got to do more. Let's do Toronto. And just looking at some of the names, Arlene Dickinson, Jim Cuddy, of course, the mayor came out. This is huge. And I saw, if you follow their Instagram account, you just see now speaking, now, and there was so much hype around it. Was the thought that Toronto was going to be bigger, bolder, or was it always going to be same tone?
We really do have a grassroots vibe about these events. So even though we're getting people like Jim Cuddy out and Arlene Dickinson, it still feels very much like a community event. And it still feels very much like it's a DIY, kind of feeling. And we like that. That's what we want. This is grassroots. This is nonpartisan. This is for anyone. We decided to do Toronto because it's, the country's biggest country. It's the heart of the Canadian media. And we had a great media turnout. We had a great turnout in the crowd. And it just felt like the right place to do, or the right kind of next step. And it was funny, Mel, because we, so Ottawa happened and it was great response. And, we gave it 24 hours. And on the Tuesday after Ottawa, I sent an email to the woman who runs events at Nathan Phillips Square. And I was like, hey, we want to do this thing and we want to come to Toronto. And she emailed me back and she was like, it sounds great, but it takes 8 months to get a permit to do something in Nathan Phillips Square. And, maybe you could try for 2026. And we just started calling people in our network. And eventually I somehow got connected to the chief of staff of the mayor. And she was like, we love this. We want to do this here. And the same woman who told me no on Tuesday called me on Friday and was like, okay, we're on. How can we do this? How can we help? And they've been amazing. And every municipality that we've done this in, we're now doing Halifax next, have been just kind of rolled out the red carpet and have been, great partners.
I think it really speaks to, again, our Canadian identity. So we want to put on this rally, but who are we as Canadians? Well, we are welcoming, right? We, as you said, should be nonpartisan, at least in an event like this. What kind of feedback? I wasn't at the rally, but of course, all of my news counterparts, they were all there, and I scrubbed through the footage, listened to all the interviews, and there was a feeling there. I think that's the only way to describe it. There was this sense of pride, and you saw smiles in the crowd. As you said, there are musicians, there are people that are just genuinely talking about what it means to be Canadian and why we cannot back down. When you hear the feedback from people in the crowd and what they are saying and seeing, how does that make you feel with what you've started? I say started because I know it's far from over.
Yeah, listen, it feels great. I think the two biggest kind of words and feedback that come out of what we're doing is connection and reflection. And isn't that like super Canadian, right? We are connecting with each other. And when, this country is going through something right now, we're in a moment and we are all feeling something. And when you're going through something, it's natural as humans to gather. And here we are, I think that was the instinct that I felt and that my wife felt. And here we are gathering in cities, across the country. And it's not just now in Toronto and Ottawa. I mean, there's organic events that are popping up across the country, and I'm happy to talk about those in a minute. But yeah, there's this natural instinct to connect. And that's really the main feeling that people kind of, come away with from these rallies. And then also reflection. And it's also very Canadian to reflect about what it means to be Canadian and how that is constantly changing, and we're redefining it and thinking about it. And when you think about that in contrast to what it means to be American, for instance, like Americans have no problem saying what it means to be American. But Canadians, I think as a strength, are always kind of asking, what does it mean to be Canadian? What are Canadian values? What is unique about being Canadian? And I think that's one of the benefits, maybe the silver lining for this moment, is that not only is it bringing us together, but it's giving us a sense to really think about who we are.
It's interesting because it took this threat for us to step back and reevaluate. It feels like, and it's not necessarily, of course, economically and for so many other reasons. Yes, this threat is so very real and dangerous. But for us as Canadians to redefine who we are, this is perhaps a positive. So let's talk a little bit about the movement that's happening within communities across the country. I know you offer this toolkit, which is really smart because you can't be everywhere. Your team members can't be everywhere across the country, but you want to keep it going. So how are you encouraging others to make this happen within their communities?
Yeah, so we built a toolkit. We put it up on our website and have taken everything that we've done, whether it's programming or press releases or, our mission, vision, and values, our logo even, and said, okay, here you go. Here's the blueprint. Take it, run with it. And so far, Victoria has stepped up, and they're doing an event this Saturday, which is April 5th. And then I've just got off the phone with some folks in Sault Ste. Marie. They want to do something on April 26th. They're very excited, very passionate Canadians. They have a great, venue, and they're inviting all sorts of people to come. They want me to go. And then there's a community in Medicine Hat that has formed, and they want to do something also on the same day on April 26th. We've been in touch with Vancouver. They want to do something. So, and we're really open to anyone doing these events. Again, as long as they're sort of, unity first and nonpartisan and family friendly and in line with the kind of broad values that we've set out.
I was just going to ask you, it's not like there's a screening process on who can start these rallies per se, but how do you obviously have a vision for what you want them to look like and the message to be like and the feeling to be like. We saw it go perfectly as you wanted on Parliament Hill, and in Toronto, it had that feeling, the community, the connection. But how do you ensure that it does maintain that in different communities and doesn't have a splinter or an offshoot of a different sentiment?
I think it's really about trusting Canadians that those people that are interested in doing these events, they get it. I mean, really, you send them a page or two, and right away it resonates with them. Just like the people who've got up and spoken at our events, or musicians that have played or attended the events. People get it right away. They get that feeling, and so I'm not super worried about trying to like have a tight national committee control over it. I'm happy to encourage people and have conversations about what their events look like, and if they want to put their own local flair into it, that's great. I mean, obviously, we really want the nonpartisanship to be a core value, and we ask people if they're going to have an event to really, other than the mayor of the community that they're in, to try to not have elected officials up, because those folks, have lots of opportunities already to speak about what they're doing and their feeling about the country. So really, it's just kind of self-selecting, Mel. It's been amazing to see.
I would assume it's not 100% free to be able to do some of these events. Like there would be something that would be needed funding wise. Are there donations? What does that all look like? That format.
It's a good question. So no, it's definitely not free. In Ottawa and in Toronto and in Halifax, we've put together sort of a local fundraising effort and have raised. In Ottawa, we raised $3,000 to cover things like the rental of the sound system, that type of thing. In Toronto, we had real costs with security and with sound and all of that. The budget was more just over $20,000, and so we raised that. And we're raising money for Halifax right now, and we're just doing that through our network. We're talking about at some point, maybe in the near future, putting up a donate link on our website. But because this has all happened so fast, we're not a charitable organization. We have a nonprofit that we formed that we are working through. But it's really, I mean, we've said from the start, Mel, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants and figuring this out as we go along. And funding has been part of that.
I assume at this point in time, you've got the eyes and ears of so many Canadians because, as you said, they're looking for a gathering place, or they're looking for an outlet. They're looking for that community where they can say, yes, I am Canadian. I've got those elbows up. I'm fighting back. How do you keep the momentum going? Because how long would you anticipate you would keep these rallies and keep them in the numbers of the thousands and keep the interest alive? What is the long-term goal for the organization, the movement?
It's a good question. And the honest answer is we don't know. I mean, we're trying to look at this as a marathon, not a race, because given the situation in the United States with the administration to the south, this could be 4 years of this. It could also be all over in a few months. And, we will do the rallies as long as we need to do them, I think is kind of how we're thinking about it. Again, going back to the reflection part, if you think about, again, that connection and reflection piece, at some point, I think there will be a natural transition into the more reflective side of this, and having, an opportunity to have a conversation and to continue the conversation about what it means to be Canadian and who we are as Canadians. And are we different as Canadians now than we were 3 months ago? And elbows up, for instance, that's not a particularly, if you'd said 6 months ago that Canadians would be walking around saying elbows up, you'd shake your head and say, that doesn't quite sound Canadian. But it really has resonated because it's the kind of feeling of the moment and the Canadianness of the moment. And it shows, I think, the adaptability and the resilience of Canadians, and also the pride of Canadians, that we're quietly patriotic, but when we need to be a little bit more, aggressive or a little bit more defensive, we can be.
Have you been contacted by media or citizens of different countries who have said, wow, this is really cool what you're doing? Perhaps we do. I mean, we're not the only one facing tariffs here in Canada. Have you had any contact with anyone else that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, no one's ever asked me that. Yes, I have. So I've done interviews with Norwegians, with Danish media, with American media that are all kind of interested in this. It's interesting, the Europeans in particular, who the Scandinavians, because they look at Canadians as typically, more peaceful and more kind and they're like, this doesn't quite mesh with their notion of what it means to be Canadian. Although I actually think it does. I think Canadians always have this kind of fierceness to us, but it's a little bit more low key and less in your face than our southern neighbors, for instance.
I'm thinking about 3 months ago, and then I'm thinking about 3 months down the road. And it's weird because even in the news industry, you can't really predict exactly what's going to happen. But I love your points about talking about what has happened and where we can possibly reflect. The connection and reflection is key. Peter, I'm going to leave it here because I know that there's so much more that you can say, but we don't know what it's going to be, and that's okay. At the very least, if some of our listeners today can sit back and think about what it means to be Canadian, I think we've done it right. Peter Wall with Elbows Up Canada, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Mel. Great to connect.
And that was The Big Story. As always, you can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode. Just email us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can also find us on the Seeker app or on all of your favorite podcast players. Make sure you rate, review, follow. Don't be shy. You can share. I'm Melanie Ng. Thanks so much for listening.